One is to leverage the opportunity that is the Cup, and that's everything that we're doing leading up to the event to help build the story and build the momentum. And then importantly, with our team and with our partners in the room, we want to maximize the impact during the America's Cup so that we're looking at return on investment and return on experience during the event, so that that time that people have here and that service delivery will be so amazing that it will pay dividends going into the future. So what have we been up to thus far? As you know, because we were fortunate enough to have a World Series event here in Bermuda in October of 15, there have been a whole series of events taking place around the world. So our job and our approach was to really look at building a genuine Bermuda experience and taking that on the road during these events. So obviously New York City is one of our top feeder markets, or is the top feeder market. So with the World Series event in Bermuda at Battery Park, we were able to really take a look at building that experience delivery, being able to engage with folks here through a series of events, from the Sailors Ball with the Manhattan Yacht Club, which was actually in mid-April, going into the event that week. Then we went on to Chicago. Again, another primary market, even though we do not have direct service. Chicago is definitely in our top 10. So we were really creating engaging ways to communicate, and yes, people stole the full hot pillows. That was charming, for sure. But we were really looking at how to build that engagement. So there was a triangle-shaped info bar that our team was there working on sharing information, capturing emails. So one of the things was data capture for us, so looking at ways to do that through photo booths, through the info booth. So we captured over 5,000 emails over the course of these events to be able to then go back and communicate with them about what hotel packages are available through Travel Places, which is the official travel provider for the America's Cup. Then on to Portsmouth in UK, which obviously is a key market for us. Another great event and engagement there. And then on to Toulon in France. So you can see a bit of an aerial shot of the 40 by 40 booth space that we had for engagement there. And the temporary tattoos in Toulon, for some reason, were a huge hit. So that was really fun to work with. So those were the World Series events, and there's the final one in Japan this weekend. And then everyone begins to turn their attention to the execution of the event here in Bermuda in June of 2017. So from Japan in November to May in Bermuda, there's a whole lot of space. So the operations people are absolutely thrilled that they have all that runway to work on the operations and delivery of the event in 2017. The marketing and promotions and PR people think, oh my gosh, that's a lot of space to fill in between to keep the momentum and the interest going in the sport and in Bermuda. So we've been working with a number of our partners and America's Cup partners to think of ways to really leverage this. So one of the ones that has been actually a year and a half in the making with Red Bull is a crazy concept to actually have Jimmy Spithill foil from New York City to Bermuda. That actually took place several weeks ago. And the content was just released yesterday to the world. So Jimmy and crew foiled on a catamaran from New York City to Bermuda in 66 hours. 662 miles, 25-foot swells, and 40-knot winds. I think you'll see Jimmy's quote here and experience. So he had a crew with him, and Emily, who is actually part of Bermuda's Red Bull team, was actually part of the crew. So to have a young Bermudian female be a part of this crew was really spectacular. So I'm just going to take just a few minutes to show you the BTA signed on early as a partner with Red Bull just from the proximity message alone, to be able to make the connection from New York City to Bermuda, and that you could actually foil that. and that it's a 90-minute flight, wheels up, wheels down, really is a great opportunity for us to partner with a content beast like Red Bull is, to be able to create this storyline. So again, this content was just released out in social and has already been picked up by 3 outlets globally. The Wall Street Journal is going to be writing another article about this, so there's a lot more to come. But this again is just an example of working around the America's Cup, but also leveraging the opportunity in the storyline. So hopefully I'm going to be able to share with you a quick video piece here.
My name's Jimmy Spithill, and I'm skipper of Oracle Team USA. And we're here to take the F4 from New York to Bermuda and prove that foiling in the open ocean is the next step in the evolution of offshore sailing. Unfortunately, we're on a hold. We can't go. It just would be unsafe. So we're going to go out today. We're going to continue training, continue learning, pushing the boat. A good day today. We'll be ready when the right weather comes. Okay, so here we are. The weather window's opened up and we are all go, hopefully, to leave New York first thing in the morning.
Breeze is up, let's stop Bermuda.
Love the Red Bull product shot there.
We had great conditions out of Manhattan, foiled out of Manhattan, pretty much foiled to the Gulf Stream. The first half was incredible. Some of the best sailing I've ever done. And I mean, the speeds, it was just, you know, you speak to the guys on board, and it's like, wow, this is possible, you know. Upon clearing the Gulf Stream, the sea state and the ocean started to escalate. I was really starting to get concerned because I knew we had gone from a performance run where you push the boat, sail the boat, to ultimately somewhat of a survival situation for the second half of the trip. No doubt in my mind, offshore foiling is the next step in terms of performance offshore. I mean, that we clearly proved that, but there's a limit. No matter what, Mother Nature will decide at what level you are going to operate. And Mother Nature made that decision for us.
I'm just glad I worked on the marketing and PR side of that, not the operational side. What you see in the video is they actually had to scrub that mission twice because of weather. So they were very much concerned about the safety first of the sailors, but to be able to show the feat of that. So there's some really great grist and storytelling that's going to be coming out further from this. There's a whole video clip that is on Emily and on her training and working with these world-class sailors. She was interviewed by several national publications in advance of this mission, so that is forthcoming. So this is an example of how we've been working, you know, under an NDA, you know, with a partner like Red Bull and Sperry and others to be able to create this kind of content that's going to have a lot longer leg and be able to get us into and through 2017 and going into the event itself. One of the other things that we're looking at and working closely with ACEA and Team Oracle and some of the other teams is that they will be launching their new boats in the first quarter of 2017. So how do we take that and create promotional events, client entertainment events, media exposure around the launching of the boats here that will give us another content spike? And then there's some other sort of roadshow opportunities that we'll talk about in the luncheon session a little later on. One of the other opportunities that we're under research for right now is working with content partners and other brand partners, because we know that there are capacity issues in terms of how many visitors we can have here on the island. Is how do we look at those key feeder markets like New York, like Boston, like Newport, that we can create viewing party kits where we work with yacht clubs in those major markets to be able to create experiences that are going to be carrying that Bermuda brand, creating that experience and that lifestyle so that we can leverage that. So those are just a few ways we wanted to share with you how we're thinking about leveraging the America's Cup. But we also wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to hear directly from Dan from America's Cup Event Authority. Thankfully, you got left behind, so you got from Japan, because I know a lot of your crew is there now. But this is such a great opportunity to gather with our industry partners to hear about your plans and hopefully share some of those things as well. So we're going to go into that. So Dan? Yeah.
Thanks, Vic. I actually use this as the perfect excuse not to jump on a 15-hour flight. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Barnett, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of the America's Cup Event Authority and Oracle Team USA. I'm very excited to be here and sharing this discussion with you all, so thanks to Vic and Bill for inviting me along. I just wanted to mention, I mean, you saw the boats there that Jimmy was sailing, and really that is a reflection of what you're going to see next year. Gone are the days of sailing being white triangles on a blue background with slightly tubby guys like myself waiting for their next gin and tonic. These guys, Jimmy, the Oracle Team USA, and Team BTA will be absolute beasts. And just to give you an indication of that, the grinding machines that they have on the boats, where they're effectively manually pumping oil through the wing, in a short space of time, the power that those guys get from their arms doing that is greater than a Tour de France sprinter going uphill with his legs. So these guys really are supreme athletes, and that'll continue to be understood and known as we start educating the public about that, particularly during the course of next year. So what I wanted to do before we get into the group discussion is just give you a brief overview of what to expect next year. Yep. So what we've had over the course of the last 2 years, it's been a long journey, but it's been an incredible one, is 9 World Series events, as Vic touched on, where we've been to all corners of the globe trying to champion the America's Cup and also Bermuda being the host of the America's Cup. We've had some incredible events. In New York City, we had, I think it was 175,000 people over 2 days. Then we went on to Chicago, two very big tourism hubs for Bermuda, as we both know, and that had 200,000 people there. But I think mine and most people's favorite event was the Bermuda event in October of 2015, where Bermuda really came out in force. And I think there was around 10,000 people that weekend who came to watch the racing. You know, the biggest point for me was when we were sat there at the opening ceremony, I think it was on the Friday evening, and you looked around and there was an incredible sense of ownership and pride in Bermuda putting on this event. Now, I was there in San Francisco during the last event, and I have to tell you candidly, that was not there, which is why I and so many others are so excited about what we're about to see in May and June 2017. Because believe me, if you thought that was big, this is 10 levels higher than that. So what I wanted to show you is effectively what we have is the location for the America's Cup in May and June 2017 will be all here in Bermuda over a period of about 25 days. And the racing itself will be in the Great Sound. But we also have J-Class regattas and Super Yacht regattas as well as the Red Bull Youth America's Cup, which will be up to 16 teams, youth teams. I think it's people up to the age of 23 from competing nations all over the world who will come on and take Team BTA on as the host nation for the Red Bull Youth America's Cup. What you can see here is the schedule. It's a packed schedule and it's a long schedule, so it's going to be exciting and there's going to be a lot happening. It starts on the Friday, the 26th of May, with the qualifiers, which is a series of races where the 6 competing teams each race each other twice in a round robin. And that is match racing. So if any of you guys have seen the World Series, it's been fleet racing, so all 6 boats racing at once. This is very different type of racing that's happening in the Great Sound, so it'll be one team against another. That will happen starting on the Friday, which will be the opening day. There'll be lots of buzz around the world for that, going through into, and we've got, over the period of 4 weekends, we've got the events going on. Now, from the World Series, just to give you a bit of details, from the World Series, the winner of that World Series will take a couple of points into the qualifiers, so they will start effectively with a head start. Now, from the qualifiers, you see the 6 teams there. After that double round robin, one of those teams will get knocked out and go into the Challenger semi-finals. Now, Oracle Team USA, who is the defender of the Cup, having won it in San Francisco, immediately moves to the finals. So you have 4 teams there, again racing against each other in a best-of-5 match race series. The 2 teams from that who win that semi-finals then go into the Challenger finals, which is raced on the 3rd weekend. And then the winner of that in a best-of-7 goes on to take on Oracle Team USA in the finals itself. Now, like I said, you've seen some of the positive buzz. We've got incredible TV numbers already. We've got an incredibly strong commercial program that's built up through the World Series. What I'd like to reiterate is the finals is a completely different ball game. When I was there in San Francisco, having not been subject to it before, you are sat there on day 1 of the America's Cup finals with the world's media looking in on this race. And the crowds are going crazy with patriotism, not just sailing fans, but nationalistic fans of New Zealand or the UK or the US, wherever it may be. And you do get goosebumps. And that's reflected in the numbers afterwards, just to give you an indication of the level of exposure Bermuda will receive globally from this. Simply during the finals of the America's Cup last time, the global viewership audience across dedicated secondary news program was 55 million people. Now, what you see in front of you is the America's Cup Village here, which really is a thing of beauty and has popped up in no time at all. Effectively, you've got that is the finish line of the race course, the bottom left-hand side of the screen there. So we really will be having stadium racing. So you'll have the turquoise blue waters as your racetrack, and then Bermuda with your amphitheatre, and the Bermudan public, the VIP guests, the media, the press, etc., will be there at the finish line. And they can actually see the majority of the race from that position as well. So you'll also see on here super yachts to the right-hand side and the left-hand side. You'll see the Red Bull Youth America's Cup boats moored at the back of the venue, and all of the teams will be based around here, either within the village itself here, which is on the island, or just behind it there on the mainland. So effectively, we're going to have a hub of activity for the entire 5-week period. So a typical day for the America's Cup, the village is not open every day, but it's open every day that there is effectively America's Cup racing, which you'll have seen from the previous schedule is most days. So on a typical day, it will mainly open around 11 a.m., maybe 12 noon, and it will be open on weekdays until around 6 p.m., and on weekends, including Fridays, it will be open until 9, 10, 11 p.m. Now, that will include a packed schedule, so if I was a Bermudan resident and I came to watch the racing, I would arrive there would be entertainment as from noon onwards, there'd be food and beverage, there'd be merchandise I can get a hold of. There is going to be a kids zone with face painting, educational areas. There will be entertainment on the stage, and then a dock-out show, I think around 1:15, where each of the teams are introduced for that day and then led out onto the water. Racing is then from 2 till 4, and then after that, they'll be coming back in, there'll be entertainment on the stage within the village, etc., a very family feel to that, and then there will be poster signings and meet the skippers around 4:45 before additional entertainment goes on. The key for us is to make that a place where people want to go. We expect a lot of people on the water, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people will be in the spectator boats. You'll have 80 to 100 super yachts lined up on the left-hand side of the race course, but we also want to make that race village an incredibly bubbling place to be. And here you see the provisional race course, which I touched on before. whether you would see them, it's effectively the same format as you would see for the World Series, with a start box down there, where they're jostling for position. Remember, it's 2 boats this time, and then they would go up and down, with the legs depending on the time limit. We're looking at probably 20-minute races right now, because from various analytics, we've realized that is the most exciting racing length time. And so they probably go back between 6 and 10 times between those 2 buoys, and then up into the finish line where everyone is at the village. So as you can see, it makes perfect use of Bermuda as a racetrack, which with 2 helicopters, 2 Cambria boats, you will see Bermuda on high across 25 days of racing, being beamed all over the world, where we'll be in 200 territories across 40 to 50 broadcasters. And just to put that number in perspective as well, 200 territories, the Super Bowl for each of the last 3 years has been between 195 and 198 territories. So we will have broader exposure than the Super Bowl, simply because of the mass international appeal of the America's Cup. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. We wanted to have the opportunity just to provide you an overview, and yes, if you didn't have your binoculars out in the audience to see some of that schedule, we will be providing the PowerPoints for you so that you can have those. There's a lot of other work going on, and as you can imagine, because I'm sure you have lots of questions yourself, there's still a lot of work to be done. And again, as they go through Japan this weekend and then turn their full attention to the operations and planning for Bermuda in 2017. With that said, there's a whole role that ACBDA, which is really the local host committee that was established initially as part of the group to bid to win the Cup for Bermuda, that is now delivering on the host venue agreement and all the commitments that Bermuda made in order to have the Cup here. And that is Peter Durhager's great responsibility and privilege. And also, Peter worked on leading the team that worked on the bid to win the America's Cup. So from that perspective, Peter, I want to start the Q&A with you. Given your role in actually getting the Cup here, and now as chairman of ACBDA, what do you think is the greatest opportunity that Bermuda has going into the America's Cup?
Sure. Look, a couple things. When we went through the bid process, and I think it is right to sort of start there because that's where the opportunity fuse got lit. I've said from the beginning, this is one part about a sailboat race, and for Bermuda, 9 parts about other stuff. So the opportunity for Bermuda in this goes much further than the technical sailboat race that people will engage in and all of the excitement around that. This is the biggest opportunity for Bermuda is if we really see this as a catalyst. A catalyst, nothing focuses the mind like a deadline and a finish line, right? The things that you have to get accomplished. So I submit to you that Cross Island, which is the 9 acres site in the South Basin of Dockyard, would not have been built in 2015-16 if there wasn't a deadline. That project has been in planning for something like 7 years. And I can tell you that it did make my knees knock together a time or two when I realized we were going to be building 9 acres where there was water before we even got started with delivering on our objectives. But there's nothing that focuses the mind like a deadline, like a common cause. And so for Bermuda, I think the biggest opportunity is using the America's Cup as a leverage point, as a catalyst for a range of things. And it starts with our attitude towards each other and towards the outside world and towards our lot in life. I think in the bid process, it became really apparent to us that we were gun shy, that we were not punching above our weight, something we've done for 400 years previously, that we would have been quite satisfied to just have a World Series event. And when I woke up one morning realizing that we were effectively shying away from the big prize, it clicked for me that we really needed to get our act together as a community again. And so I think it's much bigger than a sailboat race. I think the foreign direct investment that has been compelled to act because of the catalyst of the America's Cup is huge. The platform it's given the BTA to relaunch Bermuda as a destination, the reinvestment in the tourism product, And frankly, I'll go further than that. I'll say the discussion that it's generating within the community, and it does, and it's good, bad, and ugly, right? It is part of that catalyst. It's part of building that pressure. I think we've made some real mistakes in our community in the last 20 or 30 years. In part, that relates to the way we aspire for the future. The jobs that we have trained ourselves for, the education that we've gone off and sought. So whether it was a niece, a nephew, and a grandchild, sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, we went off to school to learn to be accountants, underwriters, actuaries, lawyers, really focused on the international business, insurance, reinsurance in particular, some asset management and so on. And we were disproportionately endowed with capable people as a result of that, disproportionately. And that's been hugely valuable to Bermuda as a community and as a country. But it's also created a disconnect between the haves and the have-nots, from an education perspective, from an economic opportunity perspective. And I got to tell you, I'm one of those people who's, I left local business after I sold Logic to what is now Keytech a long time ago, and I moved into the international space because I knew if I was going to work as hard as I was going to work, I wanted to be rewarded for it. And that reward looked like international business. I think that sucks, to be honest. And I think that looking back, we have kind of set ourselves up for this weird disconnect. And we created kind of the people who do international business and everybody else. And along with that, in a lot of ways, we've lost our service ethic. We confuse service and servitude all the time in Bermuda. And I think this is a wake-up call. This is an opportunity to reset that. It's an opportunity to find pride again in things outside international business. And that pride can be because of opportunities. New hotels, whether it's the St. Regis, whether it's the Lauren, whether it's the Morgan's Point development, phenomenal opportunities are going to come out of the back of that, which I think in part have been bolstered along by the America's Cup. I also think that the recurring revenue sources from this event are going to be extraordinary. Putting Bermuda on the map to the kind of scope and the kind of volume of people that are in our target market around the world is really a renaissance for Bermuda's tourism, and these guys have taken full advantage of it. I think also the super yachts. It is hard to begin to describe for you. You got the slightest inkling from the World Series event back in October, but it's hard to describe the kind of energy that's going to be in this community. And I'll give you a couple of examples. We could do this all day, right?
We don't have all day.
I'll give you a couple of examples. One super yacht was here this past summer for 3 weeks. The average weekly flower bill for that yacht, for fresh flowers, average weekly flower bill over the 3 weeks is $24,000. Okay? So when I have people tell me what's in it for me, why should I care, I don't care about sailing, how's it going to impact local businesses and so on, you better hold on to your seat, because and it's a double-edged sword, right? So that gives you an inkling as to the multiplier effect within the community, and it may break some stereotypes about whose opportunity it is in terms of how broad the opportunity is, but it also tells you better bring your A game. You better figure out how to service that requirement. And that's just one example of one section of it. But the recurring revenue business from regattas, from sailing activity in Bermuda, these people, you see the summer fishing guys, they drop a lot of money when they're in Bermuda. And the super yacht crowd, the sailing super yacht crowd, is going to make that look really tiny. So, we could talk about opportunities all day long, like I said, but they are real, and they are broad, and they are deep.
So Bill, looking at it from a tourism perspective, what do you think is the biggest opportunity we have in front of us?
Yeah, so Vic, thanks for that, and Peter, Dan, thanks for being with us. But from my perspective, it's really about the legacy of America's Cup. They've been able to take us already, and will into the future, to places we could never go on our own. The relationships we have with Moet, with Louis Vuitton, with our other partners, Bremont, Sperry, we just couldn't buy that. And so having those connections to those kinds of brands a positive, uplifting, powerful event like America's Cup does wonders for our own brand and our own architecture around brand. And it's given us a chance to go to markets in a way that we could never have gone before. So that's an exciting prospect. And if you look at our pace report, you'll see that we see some really big surges next year, starting in March and April, going through May and June. But the surges remain. We do get a little bit of a drop later in August and September, but the surge actually remains. And I don't think we're ever going back again to where we currently are today. I'm convinced that from an occupancy perspective, from a GDP perspective, we're going to a place, a new place, a higher place than we are today. And I'll use the good example, and Peter mentioned it around super yachts. We've already been able to attract a new yachting event, the oyster yachts. And if you're familiar with yachting, and I'm by the way, I'm a novice at yachting. I know something about tourism. I don't know much about sail racing, but I'm learning. Oyster yachts.
You like the boats a lot.
I do like the boats a lot, by the way. But oyster yachts is the Bentley or the Rolls Royce of yachting. And because of America's Cup, they will come here in May for anywhere from a week to 10 days. These vessels will come to Bermuda and will spend the kind of money Peter was talking about, $24,000 a week on flowers. I hope they all spend that amount, Peter. But those are the kinds of events that before America's Cup, but for America's Cup, we could have never hosted them. And so that's exciting. Remember that, May of 2018. We also are speaking with other classifications of the preeminent yachting classifications of the world that have come to us, that are interested in us. And if you know, Swan is another yacht classification of extraordinary boats, Cadillacs, Rolls Royces of yachting that have an interest in Bermuda now. The same with other races, Antigua, Marion. You'll see, again, more vessels coming from Newport to Bermuda in future years. And the super yachts, and Dan mentioned it, the 80 to 100 super yachts that will be here will absolutely unequivocally tax our infrastructure. But the intention is, it's not about America's Cup, it's about them coming back again and again and again and again as they reposition out of the Med and the Caribbean, as they make their movements from the East Coast to Europe. We're a logical site that we've been bypassed forever because we haven't had the facilities. And we haven't invited them. We've actually failed to invite them. And from a regulatory perspective, just from a hospitality perspective, from a service perspective. So we better show up with our A game in late May 2017 for the super yachts, because there's really like zero tolerance among the super yacht owners, these ultra high net worth individuals, around hospitality. We'll have to deliver.
So one note about that for our hotel partners, DMC partners, transportation folks in the room, event providers or entertainment providers, one of the things we're talking about in terms of thinking about the America's Cup and during, maximizing the event during, is looking at these kinds of individuals who will be coming either to entertain on those super yachts or be entertained on them, is they all own companies, they all have conferences, they all have executive board meetings, they all have incentive trips where they're incentivizing and rewarding their high-performing employees with incentive trips. And so we're thinking about how are we going to be communicating to them, not just about having a great time while they're here, but how do we soft sell into them, or maybe not so soft sell into them in their hotel experience, in their entertainment experience, in their transportation experience, about how they can think about coming back to Bermuda with that conference, with that incentive group, with their family for vacation, so that we're thinking about the longevity and the leverage of this, not just for that moment in time, but to be able to bring them back. So just a quick note on that. Dan, you mentioned that you were in San Francisco, and as people are starting to turn their attention post-Japan, what do you see as one of the biggest challenges we have in front of us?
I see the biggest challenge, and I think it's something Peter and Bill have touched on already. I think it's very dangerous to think about this as a sailing event. Because if you start thinking of it in terms of sailing,
you immediately put a glass ceiling on your expectations of what needs to be delivered and serviced and who will be coming to the island and just how big a thing this will be. I'd like everyone to please think about this as a major national team event of global importance, because that's what it is. That's what it was in San Francisco, that's what it was in Valencia, and sure as hell that's what it'll be like in Bermuda. And in fact, the level of interest is greater than it ever has been. Our CEO, Russell Coots, who is the most decorated America's Cup sailor of all time, is convinced that this is going to be the greatest America's Cup we've ever had. And in all of my discussions with international media, international broadcasters, international sponsors, merchandisers, they are far more interested in this cup than they have been in the past. So, we talk about the super yachts, we talk about the, sponsors coming to the Club AC hospitality every day. Only a handful of them will be the actual sponsors, our representative from BMW, Louis Vuitton, Sperry, Moet, etc. They're bringing 500 clients with them every single day to be wined and dined at sea level, at sea level. Most of those being from aboard, having their first taste of Bermuda. Next door to the sponsor hospitality, you'll have a spectator, non-sponsor hospitality option, where other corporations who are not necessarily associated with us will be bringing 500 clients per day as well. There is a greater chance, there is a greater opportunity for Bermuda to put its front foot forward here than there ever has been.
So, Peter, what's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, I think it's the contra side of the same coin, right? So how Bermuda chooses to show up in this in the face of this opportunity is also the challenge. Because it scares me. Brexit scares me. The Hillary-Trump dynamic scares me.
Me too.
The polarization that's happening in not just politics, but on a global level, right? All that nonsense is in the system, and what's in the system is also in us. And so we got to decide how we're going to show up. Are we going to show up knowing that there's an election within probably 6 months or so of the America's Cup, and find ways to beat the crap out of each other in public about what's not right or what could be different or better? Or are we going to show up, as we did at the World Series event, every one of us welcoming visitors, guests to Bermuda? And so I think that's a challenge. And I think it's the biggest challenge. Within that, there are lots of levels of those challenges. If we have 50 to 100 super yachts with the expectations that Bill's highlighted, how do we make sure that we move our mental mindset from, oh, no, our yacht clearance is at Ordnance Island in St. George's. Please go line up down there. Okay, and you got a line 10 miles out to sea of yachts trying to clear. So we can't, it's not just about throwing bodies at it for the customs and immigration folks. It's about looking at the problem differently, looking at the opportunity that it brings, and saying, okay, how do we clear in Hamilton and in Dockyard and at Morgan's Point and in St. George's? And how do we turn it on its head, right? Michael Bloomberg busts my chops every time he sees me and says, I'm on my airplane, me, it's me and Diana and our golf coach, and we're coming in for the weekend to play golf. You know my plane, you know who's on it. Why do we have to go through that at 10 o'clock at night? Question mark, right? So what does pre-clearance look like? So that we see only the people we need to because there's a visa issue or there's some other technicality. We know who's coming. We need to turn the problem around. So there's lots of examples like that are going to present challenges. They are going to, and how we respond to those challenges is going to define what kind of opportunity we have, how we reinvent ourselves in some cases to service the opportunity. So that's. I think it really comes down to how Bermuda shows up.
So with that in mind, Peter, and then Bill, I'm going to go to you with this question. Peter, what's one recommendation you have for our tourism partners in the room today to ensure that this event is a success and that they are successful in their jobs, so it's a return on investment for them in terms of their livelihoods and their businesses? Yep.
So I think it actually comes down to leadership. I think everybody in this room is in this room probably because you're in an influencing role. You're in a senior role, you're in a leadership role within your respective organization. And I think if you decide that this is the catalyst for raising the bar in your respective space, in your hotel, in your business, and you lead from that place and you inspire your people and you give them an opportunity to see this as a catalyst to grow personally and as a community, then I think that is the biggest single thing you can do. It's too late to build more hotel rooms. It's too late to do a whole bunch of other stuff. So the question is, how do we take what we've got and execute? And that comes down to people. Because if everybody's singing from the same book, if we have an aspiration, and that means having a discussion about what good looks like and what great looks like. All too often in Bermuda, we confuse good with great. Right? And so we have got to decide that we are going to raise the bar. We got to have conversations inside our organization. What does that look like? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for you? How do we need to show up? What training do we need to bring online? What planning do we need to do? What contingency planning? Because you got to assume things are going to go wrong. And the people in your organization know that stuff. They just got to be called on to bring it to the front, because if everybody in this country is an ambassador, then I think, and you guys are on the front lines of that. You have the biggest influence on how we show up within the hospitality space. And I would just say, whatever the standard has been historically, it's got to go up. Like, don't think incrementally, think exponentially.
Bill, what about you? What is a recommendation you have for our partners in the room to ensure success?
Thanks, Vic. I used to have a golf coach, was a Scottish guy, and he'd go out and I'd hit golf balls for him. We'd practice, and I'd hit a ball out of bounds. I'd hit the ball straight up in the air. I'd hit it over here, and every once in a while he'd say, "Bill, find your game, lad. Find your game." And I would suggest we do the same thing. We really do need to find our game. The people that are in this room are going to be the difference between a successful America's Cup and a not too successful America's Cup. And we're really going to have to go all out. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be a 6-week pull where you're going to be taxed. Your staffs are going to be taxed. You're going to be taxed. The systems are going to be taxed from a provisioning perspective. That's all going to put us right on the fringe of our complete capabilities. So we're just going to have to buckle down and really go get it done. And then the other piece of this would be that we need to take the politics out of this. I mean, I can say this because I'm leaving now, but there should be no politics around America's Cup. There should be no politics around America's Cup. This is about economic development. This is about putting Bermudians to work. And anybody that says that this doesn't help the economy is living under a rock. That is not true. The America's Cup will be a huge, huge economic boost for Bermuda in the short term, but also from a legacy perspective will be a huge economic boost. And we ought to be damn thankful that they're here on our shores. So take the politics out of it, but then let's all show up and find your game, lads, because we're going to need it.
Good point, Bill. I just want to point out just a small example of a logistical detail. So there's the upside of $24,000 a week on flowers. So think about that from how many florists we have on the island to how far in advance they have to order those flowers before they arrive on a container. And also from an event production standpoint, think about all those brands that were just mentioned, and think about we just came out of rugby, and I think there was one tent at rugby that came from rugby to then come to an event that we entertained at Fort Hamilton for our tour operator partners that's on island. That's one tent. Do you know how many tents we're going to need for the 30 days of this event across multiple corporations entertaining all of these clients that can then think about bringing their conference or event here? There's a scope and a depth to this that we as a community, that we as partners really need to think through, because we have 6 months to do that. When that yacht owner wakes up, as they do, one would only, hope that you could be one day, at 3 a.m. and say, I want roses, or I want, Moet, which we'll have plenty of that, thankfully, but we need to anticipate what their needs are going to be in order to really shine. And I think that's where, and I've seen it happen many times over, how people come together who sometimes see themselves as competitors, but when it comes to actually pulling off an event, become collaborators. And I think that's really where the rubber's going to hit the road for us in really thinking about how much there is to gain from it. So with that, I'm just going to ask a closing question before we have a couple of opportunities for questions from the group. Dan, having, again, worked a cup before, seeing how, and studying how they've worked and maybe how they haven't for some communities, and thinking about the legacy, what's your hope for Bermuda? I mean, you have a family here now. The America's Cup family keeps growing. I don't know what's happening in the water here, but lots of America's Cup babies in Bermuda these days. So what's your hope for legacy given your background and perspective?
Like I said before, it's ambitious, but my hope and intention is to help make this the greatest America's Cup of all time, both locally here in Bermuda, for the residents and all the stakeholders, and internationally, so that people will look back fondly on this and see this is an incredible experience that puts Bermuda and the America's Cup on the map. Personally, my wife would kill me if I told her we had to leave the island, so I've got to deal with that one myself. But look, I'd love to see it here another time, and a time after that, to be honest. I think all the teams love it here. They're all coming here much earlier than they came to San Francisco. And like I touched on before, there is a real sense of pride and ownership in Bermuda that I've never seen with the America's Cup before. And that is exciting, to work with people who want to work with you. It feels like an America's Cup family here already, and we're not necessarily in the papers or the press or the radio every day at the moment, but I think that's on purpose to a certain extent, partly because we're trying to make ourselves known in Japan, and secondly because we don't want to saturate or dilute the expectation or the momentum. So I think what you'll all see is that from sort of March, April next year, things will really start to build in the public's eye. But again, what we need to not do is start thinking about it ourselves then. We have to think about it operationally, administratively, strategically, about everything right now. And if we do that, I'm pretty convinced that this is going to be an incredible event that everyone can be very proud of.
Bill, lasting legacy?
Yeah, again, I'll go back to the trend line I mentioned before. That trend line is not going down. The trend line is going up. And it's going to continue to go up because of America's Cup. It is, I said it before, I'll say it again, it's taken us to places we could never go on our own, and really, but for America's Cup, we would not be positioned as well as we are right now to take full advantage of the event in June, but then also take real advantage of the event after the fact into 2018, 2019, 2020, and with that, we're putting Bermudians to work.
Peter.
Yes, so look, I think the recurring revenue opportunities that flow from this are extraordinary. If we got the Sailing Super Yacht Regatta back either on an annual or biannual event, the RC-44 class, the GC-32s, the Phantoms, the Moths, you name it, and all these folks bring all kinds of people with them, all kinds of needs and requirements, so that in itself would be huge. We were very focused on not building legacy infrastructure that would not be reusable. So when we have cut deals, we've said if we don't see the opportunity to reuse it, at the end you have to take it away with you if you leave. Because that's essential. We don't want a bunch of derelict infrastructure, white elephant stuff that doesn't make sense for Bermuda. But we obviously have 9 acres in the South Basin that we can reuse, that we can redeploy, and WEDCO's working hard with help from Deloitte and others to really look at what are the opportunities that cut across economic, environmental, social sustainability, and produce the right kind of bang for the buck in redeploying that land going forward. One example. And there are lots of others. We are putting together, with the help of the BBDA, Ross Weber, Kevin Richards, and folks like that, and we have a legacy and sustainability committee that's working now to define that. And one of the big things we're trying to do is bring together a series of opportunities. We're calling it a portfolio of opportunities. You can figure out what the acronym is for that. But that portfolio is when people are sitting in Bermuda and they're here for over a period of 5 or 6 weeks, and Bermuda is turned on and it's spectacular. These wealthy individuals will sit around and say, wonder what real estate opportunities there are, wonder what investment opportunities there are. And we need to be able to respond and say, okay, what's your interest? Is it in hotel development? Is it in infrastructure development? Is it in energy? Is it in marinas? Where do you want to play? Is it in international business, asset management? all those things. So we have an opportunity to put ourselves out there for these folks, and we're working hard to make sure that we're working with all the various people within the community, the real estate sector and project development and so on, to make sure that we can leverage that. Because the foreign direct investment opportunities that flow into Bermuda on the back of this, I think we haven't even begun to put our arms around what those could be yet.
Thank you very much to each of you, and I think we have time for a couple of questions. We have some folks with mics in the audience. So Donna, we have one here and then one here in the corner.
Hi, thank you. Just a quick question. You mentioned all the super yachts and everything, but obviously that's minimal arrivals into Bermuda. I presume that most of the arrivals come through the airport. And I don't know if there's any news on the development of the airport, because obviously as a first impression, as a last impression, and the whole immigration experience on arrival is probably not great, as we experienced on Sunday night. So is there any news on the airport development?
Bill, do you want to take it?
Yeah, I'm glad to talk about it. It was laid before, I believe it was laid before Parliament this past week, and there will be a vote within the next couple of weeks, and we're assuming that there will be an approval of an airport that is desperately needed, and we're hopeful that that project goes forward. It certainly will not be ready for America's Cup. They are making accommodations at the airport to improve our efficiency around America's Cup. We're working on additional capacity, airlift capacity, which we're going to need around America's Cup. We already have those numbers. We already have the estimates. Already have begun the conversations with the airlines about additional capacity. Also, on the private side of the airport, we have tremendous capacity to accommodate, I believe, anywhere up to 100 private aircraft at any given time. That's a big number, and we will need all of that capacity, because a whole bunch of these super yacht owners, they will not come with the vessels. They will fly in with their families, and they'll park their G4s for 10 days or however long they're here, and then leave. And we'll need the airspace and the capacity on the ground to accommodate those planes.
And Nikki, we've been the airline so airline capacity and then also arrival experience is something we've been talking about and thinking about, building, no pun intended, a runway. So we've been for several months now having these conversations with our airline partners in each of the respective markets. So Aaron on our team has been doing a lot of that analysis with some of the folks from ACBDA and KPMG that are working on the capacity and transportation issues. The other piece is again, working with potentially new partners at the airport, not that it would be a new facility, but new facility operators that would be working with us in terms of the experience delivery. With that.
It's such a slow process to get through immigration. Just on the one flight, there was no other flight around us. So surely that's got to be a massive thing for you guys, that, to have the staff and the trained staff in situ for, like you say, the private jets and all the extra uplift that's coming. Have you got the staff there to cope?
Immigrations and customs are really good partners to us. They work really, really hard at the airport to accommodate. They do have their own staff issues that they're trying to resolve, and I know that is a big effort underway by the civil service and by government to make sure that we properly accommodate our guests over America's Cup. But we need to do that every day. I'm sorry you had that bad experience, but that's not I would suggest to you that's not always typical of the way we accommodate our guests.
Yeah, flying into pick a city, it doesn't matter. In the last 6 months, I've been through lots of them. It doesn't matter whether you're flying into Lisbon or whether you're flying into New York, you're going to stand in a big old long line with lots of other people. I don't think we need to say that is the standard that we aspire to. So I think what we're trying to do is have discussion about what does the potential look like, and then what what's in our way, or what are the opportunities to get to that potential. Part of it can be manpower. I mean, we're not going to boil the ocean, right? We can't solve all problems, at once. But it starts with an awareness and an understanding. We got to make sure that people have the resources they need. And I think the government is acutely aware of those challenges and the need to be able to support the Immigration and Customs officials with resource to make it happen.
Great.
Thank you. My name is John Gardner. I just have two small positive points to add to the conversation. I'm an architect, Cooper Gardner, but I'm also an offshore sailor, and I'm wearing that hat when I stand here right now. First, I believe there's an urgent short-term infrastructure project at Ordnance Island that really needs attention, and to follow Peter's sort of raise your game. The wooden dock that pretty much the vast majority of sailors come and go is actually non-functional, and that's your front door, that's your airport for your sailors, and that's a good legacy project. I believe that's an urgent matter, which even if you did it next week with the rallies coming through would be terrific. And if you can do anything with the customs building as well, it's sort of fourth world in there too. So having said that, I'll just leave that with everybody. The question I have is, I'm just curious, the prognosis that if Land Rover BAR wins, it's going to go to Portsmouth, right? Can someone run down through the other teams and tell me what happens if they win? Like, if Oracle wins,
nobody in this room can tell you that, right? But I think
good question.
The most exciting and probably the most beneficial for Bermuda would play out something like this. It's a hard-fought fight to the finals with Ben Ainslie, Sir Ben Ainslie, Knight of the Realm, stud extraordinaire, right, with support from the royal family and everybody else, come and lose in a nail-biting final to Oracle Team USA, who decide to lather, rinse, repeat, and keep the cup in Bermuda. That would be phenomenal, right? Any other outcome, throws the thing into question. People aren't coming to Bermuda to win the cup to leave it here, and so we should not go into this cup coveting something in the future that we don't have. We should go into this cup making every opportunity that we can to maximize this cup, and to the extent that either an Oracle were to choose to defend in Bermuda, and again, if I were CEO, I might decide not to do that on the basis of it's a global sport, we want to move it around the world. So there's any number of things. I don't want people to get fixated on, ooh, it's the next bright, shiny object, right? So we need to make sure we optimize around this one. But in any scenario, I could see, because what people have discovered in Bermuda is it is an amazing place to sail and train year-round. Right? There's some advantages for the teams being here. There's infrastructure that they've built here. It's safe. Their families are happy. They can train year-round. All those things bode well for, if it were moved to some other jurisdiction, that some of the teams may well continue to operate from Bermuda, which would be phenomenal. Yeah. We have another World Series event to look forward to going forward, but also, we are going into that process even before the Cup, the 35th America's Cup. We're already in dialogue with the America's Cup about what would a lather, rinse, repeat look like. What's the return period on that? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 4 years? It's probably shorter, is one of the things that we're talking about. But also, how do we leverage those investments? How do we leverage? Because if you like it this time, if we did have an opportunity to do it again, you take all that infrastructure investment, divide by 2, and the leverage just doubled. So it's all kinds of opportunities there.
Well, thank you very much. Dan, we're going to spare you from having to answer that question. Thank you all for your attention. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your perspectives.